have the capability to rid the city of gun violence. Portland, Oregon will be that city. Better than it was before. Better, safer, cleaner. It's the $6 million plan.
Yes! Hi-ya! Oh my goodness. How'd you like that? I'm Dan Haggerty. It's Friday. Come on. Welcome to The Story. All the ways to communicate with us at the bottom of the screen. Use that hashtag HeyDan. Send us an email at thestory@kgw.com. Find me on Facebook, Instagram, any of that good stuff. And let's do some big story. How about it? All right, so the $6 million plan. We've been talking about this thing all week. It's Portland's latest strategy to tackle the spike in gun violence that we've seen so far this year. Since last year, actually. Quick refresher on the plan if you don't know the details right now. See, the city council approved it this week. Most of the $6 million, $4 million bucks, is going to community groups and nonprofits that work with the neighborhoods hardest hit by gun violence. More than $1 million will go toward hiring 24 unarmed park rangers to patrol Portland's parks around the clock. None of the money, not a single buck, not a single penny, will go toward police. But they are restructuring the Bureau to assign more officers to gun violence. Now, ever since we started talking about all of this, you guys have been flooding our inbox with questions, understandably. A lot of them have been about the park rangers that seemingly now have this new, I guess, more dangerous job. At least it sounds more dangerous. Dennis asked, why hasn't anyone spoken to the park ranger leadership to see how they feel? So actually, Maggie Vespa did talk to the park ranger supervisor, Vincent Harrison, and here's what he had to say.
What I'll say is that this doesn't change the scope of what park rangers do. I think that us being in parks, a proactive presence, engaging with the community, prevention-based services, being public safety ambassadors is the role of park rangers. We police the parks. As you mentioned, there are a deficit in police resources, and they don't have the ability to get to the 12,000 acres that parks man. And we often increase our ranger capacity in the summer, and we've often in times past increased our capacity when violence has stricken our community.
Okay, so that's what the boss thinks, but not everybody's on the same page as far as we've heard. We also spoke to a retired Portland park ranger who reached out to us after he heard about this plan, and simply put, he thinks the idea was pretty awful.
Park rangers are ambassadors, and they engage with community members. They're solution-based. They have the authority to issue warnings, citations, but their job description is not dealing with gun violence and or gang violence.
Now, I got this interesting comment here from Rob on Facebook. Rob said, in the early 90s, I worked for a private event security company that was contracted to patrol Portland parks, primarily at night. This experiment was short-lived, and responsibility shifted back to professional law enforcement as it was deemed too dangerous. Well, we looked into this, and it seems like there's been kind of this back and forth between public and private security in Portland parks over the years. And according to the Oregonian, the Portland Business Alliance was in charge of contracting out private park security starting in 1997. Then in 2012, the late Commissioner Nick Fish helped create the Portland Park Ranger program as we see it today, and as it will now be expanded thanks to this new gun violence plan. Mark wrote in about Portland police, who, again, are not getting any new funding from this plan. Why do they have so few police, he asked. Budget cuts? Relocation? Leaving an unsupportive agency? Commissioners? Mayor? Surprising gun violence is raging. Picking up your sarcasm. Well, I think there's something that is worth your time. You should check it out. The Oregonian published this story a few days ago with the headline, Overworked, Overwhelmed, and Burned Out. Why Portland cops say they're leaving in droves. Since July 1st, 115 officers have left the Bureau for reasons you can probably guess from the title. Now, we should point out, shootings began spiking here before the massive budget cuts last summer. We should also point out gun violence is climbing in cities nationwide, so we're not drawing any specific connections between defunding the police and this spike in gun violence. That said, Portland Police Chuck Lovell says He doesn't know where these new officers dedicated to this gun violence program are going to come from.
It's a complex issue, and there's room for a lot of different resources and ideas on how to tackle it. I will say it's very difficult to do with limited personnel and limited budget.
Okay, pretty diplomatic answer, I would say. The Portland Police Union was a little more blunt. PPA President Darrell Turner released a statement saying the data speaks for itself. We need to ensure that our city has enough police officers. To force the community to choose between public safety and those additional needed resources is not the solution. And by additional resources, he's talking about the community groups getting the funding instead of police. Now, speaking of that, I got a Facebook message from Lori. Hey, Dan. Who are these community groups that the Portland City Council just gave more money to? What qualifies them to stop gun violence? So I have a real quick answer to that. We don't know. We don't know who they are. Not yet. We've asked the Office of Violence Prevention which organizations are getting that money and how it's going to be sent, and we haven't heard back yet. We're hoping to hear from them soon. But here's what we do know. The money will go to organizations who have a contract with the city, specifically the Office of Violence Prevention, which has been around since 2006. They try to address violence by working with some pretty big assortments of different organizations, everything from city bureaus and government services to schools, businesses, and faith organizations. And they're going to get $4.1 million to dole out to these groups. We did look up some of the organizations that currently have a contract with that office to get an idea of who they're working with. One of them is Portland Opportunities Industrialization Center. They work with kids at Rosemary Anderson High School, kids who are at risk. Maggie Vespa talked with them last week, and they say they could certainly use the money.
Other places have a tax dedicated to this type of work. So we need these resources for us to provide better opportunities, as well as changing some of the ideologies that come along with surviving in a community that's struck with so much violence.
Other groups that have contracts with the Office of Violence Prevention are the Immigrant and Refugee Community Organization, the Latino Network, and the Native American Youth and Family Center. But again, the office hasn't told us exactly what's going to happen with this money, who's going to get the money, how much they're going to get, what their specific plans are to spend it. But Commissioner Carbon Rubio's office told us more about some of these services and what these organizations provide. They do mentorship and education. They help people find jobs. They run activities like sports teams and music programs and art programs. They connect people with health services. Now, we're going to keep following up with them to find out more about what they have planned, of course. A group that isn't slated to get any more money under this new plan is the Street Response Team. That's that new pilot project that responds to people dealing with homelessness and mental health crises. They're eventually supposed to be the ones who respond to that sort of stuff instead of police, but they're still trying to figure out exactly how that's all going to work. But under this new contract, the Office of Violence Prevention, they're not going to be giving them any more money at this time from that lot, from that $4.1 million. But last I checked, that team was still working well, up to expectations, and expanding a bit, but still in dire need of more funding. If you have more questions about any of this, I know you do, let us know. Use that hashtag, HeyDan.